what you did with it, what you've done with it since.
Mm-hmm. Well, where do you want me to start?
What do you want?
With those 3 lots down on the
All right,
point.
we'll start on April 20th, 1946. You purchased from a William Smith lots on the corner of 3rd and Battery Street. And you divided those into 3 separate lots.
Mm-mm.
Did you build houses on those?
Yes, I did.
All
Built
right.
3 new houses on.
Is there anything you wish to go into detail on that?
No, we kept it, built the houses and then we sold them.
You had your own carpenters at that point.
Yeah, and we had our own carpenters.
You did
Built
all,
the houses. It's, in those days you couldn't buy any oak flooring or any kind of flooring. So I took down a table on Ward Avenue along the one rich person over there. I took it down to Gustav White. So it had all pine sheeting. So we put a planer in the shop. We planed all the pine down so we'd have a nice smooth sheeting. And as a matter of fact, we've done those 3 houses, plus the Bellevue Avenue block has got all that same pine sheeting.
then the next piece of property was March 18th, 1947. You purchased from Seth DeBlois, Bellevue Avenue and Prospect Hill Street.
Mm-mm.
I know you have some pretty humorous stories about that building, especially with your friend Buck Trimble.
Oh, you like to tell that story? That's a tough one.
We can always bleep it out if it's a little too much.
Because it goes very far. Well, this piece of property that I bought from the DeBlois family on corner Prospect Hill Street and Bellevue Avenue. Everything was fine, but we had 2 tenants in there. One had a lease, which was made of Mayflower, and we couldn't do anything in this building.
That was the Mayflower Restaurant.
Yeah, Mayflower Restaurant. And then the 3rd one, above the Mayflower Restaurant, we had a 2nd and a 3rd decker there. And some people ran an ill-famed house in that part of it. But the balance of the property, everybody got out and we remodeled the property. So when we got,
What was the condition of that property?
it was in tough condition. It was only work, but it was paid for, because I took it apart from underground to over the roof. And but I reshaped it and made it look like a nice piece of property, and it turned out to be a nice piece of property. So we went right along with the work. We started on the north end, no, on the south end, and there on the south end we had a piece of land, so we built, added another building to our property, and it was a store for Louis James and an apartment on the 2nd floor, an apartment on the 3rd floor. They both had 2 bedrooms. So it made nice apartments to rent. And that got along. Then we got kind of caught up after a while. So I finally had to find a way. I knew I couldn't do anything with the restaurant, but I had to find a way to take care of the family that held the ill-famed business. So I thought of my insurance agent. I went over to Mr. Bremen and I told him I had a windstorm loss. That's all I told him. Over in the block, and I'd like to have it looked at. So we made an appointment for 11 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock we rang the bell and the buzzer rang, and we went upstairs to the second floor. And the lady says, "Well, what can I give you today?" Well, I said, "You can give me a nice black one." And he couldn't hear me because he was hard of hearing.
But it wasn't Packer Bremen that was
No.
with you.
No, that was Buck Trimble. The agent was with me, so he was hard of hearing, and then we went to the third floor. She says to me, "The black in that room and the white in that room." Then he listened to what we were at. He says, "Hey," he says, "what the hell are you doing?" He says, "I'm 65. I'm not any good to my wife. I'm not going to be good to her." So I says, "Lady, this is a mistake. We didn't mean to tell you that we want a black, and what we want to find out about the leaks that you have in the roof." "Oh, leak in the roof? No, we have no leak in the roof, but we have a chimney that's down. We can't put our heat in, and the back stairs are down. We can't go to the backyard." I says, "I'm the agent for the owner, and he's the agent for the insurance company. So I'm sorry," I said, "it's too early in the day for me to do anything with a colored girl, and I think it's kind of too late in the day for Mr. Trimble too. So we came over here especially for the windstorm loss." And he was mad. He says, "What the hell's going on here?" He says, "So we're going out." Well, I said, "Buck," I said, "I know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to land right in court with these people." So I said, "I have to have a witness, and I use you as my guinea pig." So it wasn't but a couple of weeks after that, I got a phone call. No, first we landed in court. Yeah, we went to court. I was right. A couple of weeks later, we got notification to get into court. So we went to court. So I was sitting down with Mr. Trimble. So they went up and they gave the court their story. And then Judge Arthur Sullivan called me to the witness stand, and Mr. Chartier, he said, "You got a bag of that accusation against you here. I hope you can do something to correct it." So I says, "Yes, Your Honor, I can't correct it." I says, "Well," I says, "can you tell me why you want the people out of the house?" I says, "Yes." He says, "Why?" I said, "Because they were running an ill-famed house in my building, and I don't want no ill-famed house. In the first place, they can't get a permit to run an ill-famed house." And he says, "Well, that's a bad accusation." He says, "Are you sure you got a witness?" I says, "Yes, I have a witness." He says, who is your witness? So I told Mr. Trimble, and so he called Mr. Trimble to a bench, and he talked with Mr. Trimble, and he turned right around. He said, "This case is dismissed." He said, and then he called these people. He said, "No," he says, "you are running an ill-famed business without a license. So therefore, I give you 30 days to get out of the house." So, didn't finish there. Then they went in and complained to the Colored People's Organization. And so I got a phone call to go to the I forgot the name of the church now.
At the Baptist church?
It was a Baptist church on Division Street. And it was a very poor church. And I'd done all the work there. And every year they'd send me $200, and it all came in $1 bill, 50-cent piece, quarters, nickels, dime, and pennies. I used to sit there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to get $200. It took 6 of them till about 6 o'clock to count it all and make sure it was all correct. So, but they were good people. I liked them. So, so the first thing when they see me come in, drive in, the Reverend got a hold of me and he says, "Follow me." So I followed him. He went to the middle of the hall and he put a saddle chair down and he said, "Sit there." Then he said, "All the people all around me." Then he says, "Mr. Chartier, we have bad accusation against you, but against our colored people." I says, "You have?" So I says, "You mind telling me the story, what it's all about?" "No." So he said the story and all that. "Oh," I says, "when it comes past it." "Yeah." I says, "I was in court here not long ago, and the court gave me the verdict that I was right. Now, can you give me a verdict that I'm wrong?" He said, "Well, I don't know anything about it." Well, I accused them of running an ill-famed house into my house on Bellevue Avenue, and therefore I had them evicted. And I wish they were around here to prove it, that they... "Oh, you think that man is here?" Well, I said, "Bring him in." So I brought him in, and I said, "Wasn't that case evicted that you were wrong?" He says, "Yeah, but it's not right." He says, we ran that privately, but I says it was an ill-famed house." I says, "So no matter who came up, you had no license, and you were running an ill-famed business. So I said, there's nothing I can do about this man, Reverend."
Bed is terrible.
Hmm?
Trying to
Then-
get her out of bed is awful.
Then a little, he says to me, the Reverend says to me, "Can you look around and show us some of our parishioners that you've done work for, that you were honestly and able with them?" I said, "Yes." I said, lady in the back here, I won't say her name, I've always done their work. And I said, they've always been nice people, quite a few of them here. So, one lady lifted up her hand, she wanted to talk. I didn't remember her. And she says, Reverend, that man got nothing to do against black people. Now I'm going to give you the story of what he done for me. She says in 1938 hurricane, my children were sleeping on wet beds because part of my roof blew off. And I didn't have no money. My husband just had died. And he came over and looked at it. And because I went to his office to get him to show it to him. And he looked at it and says, tomorrow morning somebody will be here to put a roof on for you. So next morning I put some men on, we'll put a roof on for her. And then she came back to the office. She says, I have no money. I don't know how I'm going to pay you. She says, but I promise you that I'll pay you 50 cents a week as long as I live. So 50 cents a week came to the office every week. If it wasn't her, it was a daughter would walk over and bring us 50 cents a week. We used to laugh and see that 50 cents a week. And she says, that's what that man done for me, Reverend, and you tell me he's got something against colored. He never saw me before. Came over and spent all that money on my property, never sent me a bill. So, he says, if you punish him, you're punishing the wrong man. Because I know that man, and I know he's running an ill-famed house in that house. She said, that's all I got to say. So, case was dismissed. My telephone stopped the run here, boy, and a lot of people were against me. My wife couldn't answer the phone anymore. I stopped her from answering the phone. And I told them, if they call, they can call. If they want to come over and see me, they can come over and see me. But don't not be too brutal about it, because I says, you'd go off feet first. I says, if you walk into my house with any harm on you. So the police kept watching the house all the time for me. But that's one of the true stories of my life. That isn't all now. After I got through with that, I went over to Peckerbrame and I said, you know, the little church on Division Street. Well, he said, the one that you had a lot of nice publicity on. Did he laugh? And I said, yeah. Well, I said, that's a very poor church. And I said, I done everything for all the other churches. St. Mary's on Spring Street, Trinity Church, most of them on Spring Street, and most of the church I done windstorm loss, and there were no depreciation, no deductible. No, I said, I got a little church on Division Street that don't need nowhere near the kind of work I done on the others, but it needs work. And I think we should. I said, you have them on your book. I said, yeah. I says, I said, why don't you give me permission to spend up between $8,000 and $10,000? I said, the church needs painting, roof needs repairs, and I said, most of the painting was caused damage by the roof leaking. So I said, Louis, he says, you've been very good to us and you've always been honest with us. He says, I put it in your hands. I says, yeah, you put it in my hand to do, but I'm going to put in your hand to collect. So we put it through, and they didn't know anything about it. And so the Reverend received a check for $8,000 some odd dollars. So the Reverend saw my name from Newport Roofing, and so he landed over here again, and he says, Mr. Chartier, I'd like to know what this check is for. Well, this check is kind of Christmas present to the church, because you are a poor church and you need a lot of work done and you haven't got the money to do. I decided to take it on my own and try to get you all this repairs done and paid for by the insurance. Now, don't you go to work and tell the insurance company that you don't need that work done. You need all that work done. Yes. So, done the work. When we get there, we send the bill. They sent 5 people here with the check to make sure that the 5 knew where the check went. And when I walked in the house around 5:45, my wife says to me, she says, you got people in the drawing room. They've been waiting here since about 5:15. So I walked right in and shook hands with them all. And they said to my wife, Madam, you haven't got a husband. They said, you got an angel. He says, he had all this work done for us for nothing. Don't cost us anything. So, we certainly are sorry to put him through the trouble that we did before. But I said, I didn't do it for that purpose. I said, I done it because you needed it. So anyway, they paid their bill. And it wasn't many years after that they lost the church. Now they made the church a 2-tenement house out of it. And I'm still stuck the same way. There was somebody taking a tower off it. They made a mess of it. And dropped the job. So they came to me and I done the job for them, straightened it all out, fixed all the roof up for them. But they forget to come in and pay. So now I have to get after them.
What street is that on?
That's on Division Street. And all the houses across the street from that and going up the Church Street, I bought all those houses for the Boys Club. And Howard Cushion paid for all of them. I don't know if it was personally, if he paid it for it personally, but he told me to go out and get them. Because we had a member there that was a real estate agent, John Richmond, and when he sold, a house he wanted his commission. And being a member, and the full commission, being a member, they didn't think it was so nice because Boys Club did not have the money. They were not paying for the building. So you're the person. So they put it up to me, Louis, why don't you buy the house for us? The place is going to Richmond. Yeah, I says, no reason, but I says, you know, if you want anything, you gotta ask. I'm not gonna come over and beg you for anything like that. That's work for nothing. So they turned around and I bought all the balance of the houses for them.
Were those on Division Street or on
That's
Church
going
Street?
down Church Street, across Division Street.
Is that where the Boys Club is now?
That's where the Boys Club, that's a gymnasium and the parking lot of a gymnasium.
And then they tore the houses down?
Yeah.
Now, you had a pretty active part in developing the boys' club over in, is it Saunderstown?
Of Soundtown, yeah.
How did you get involved in that?
Well, at the same time we were doing that, we had started the Boys Club in Sounderstown a few years before that. And I'm the chairman of the Boys Club camp in Sounderstown. And you, Arthur Claus, was always my bodyguard when I was over in Jamestown. And anytime I wanted to go, he'd call me up, he'd come and pick me up, we'd go to Jamestown. So we got 100 acres of land at $1 an acre. I think $1 an acre or $1 a year, I forgot. Something
$1
like-
a year.
I think it was $1 a year for 100 acres. But that was our rent. And we built a very nice boys club. The boys club, and today it's the Boys and Girls Club. So there was another a project that took a long time, and it's Jimmy Wickford. He used to draw the plan, and he retired from the Naval Train Station, civilian. And we had kind of hardship because there wasn't that much money. It was only through charity, something like that. But I didn't know that what's the name paid for the property. All I know is I brought the property in.
But you were instrumental in getting the CBs, the CBs. You were the one who brought the CBs in as far as getting electrical, getting the,
Oh, well, that was when we needed work there. When we were building the Boys Club camp, I promised them that every building that they built, that I'd put a free roof on it. Put a new roof on every building. I did. And then every year we had an annual meeting, 1st of July. So I made sure I was there working with the boys, sweating, and at least 5 of the wealthy people would come over to me and say, what do you want to work so hard for? I said, well, there's not much money here. So I was sure of $25,000 that day for my sweating. And people like Teddy Grover's sister was very wealthy. She's got every year she gave me $25,000, and she gave me 5,000, and all the others gave me 5,000. And you watching class would be there. He says, "Louis, you want me to handle a meeting for you?" I said, "Yep, you go ahead and handle a meeting. I gotta go and change my clothes." So he'd go and start the meeting, get it going. And everything ran along all right, but we always got more when he got through. So we done very, very well on our annual meeting. Wouldn't have been for the annual meeting, I don't think we could have made it. But at the time that if we needed roads to be built, or anything like that, I used to say to you, I says, we've got to go and see the Admiral. See if he hasn't got any kind of machinery we can spare to help us out to get these roads built, get everything done. So we go down and see the Admiral. And by the time we got through, the Admiral happened to have the captain of CBs come into the meeting. And so the captain of CBs said, "Well, Mr. Chartier, what do we got on the agenda today?" "Well," I said, "the Boys Club is badly in need of bulldozers, trucks, and backhoes for at least a month or two, and they have no funds to pay it." So he says, "You know, we're just receiving some. Before we send them to Europe, we need to break them in to try them out. So that kind of machine would be just right for what you want." And then I said, "The boys don't have to worry about anything about food. We'll feed them and give them a little beer if they want beer and soda." So we built all our roads and done everything that way. Maybe 3 different times I went in to see the Admiral with Uwatten class. Well, by having Uwatten class with me, it meant everything. So then the next one was we had the roads built, then we needed electric lines in the building. So I had my men measure how many feet of line they needed to bring the electric into the last building. So Larry Noons happened to be in politics in that time when Chafee was the governor. So I said, "Larry," I says, "any chance you talking to the American Telephone or the New England Telephone and donating the poles, and we'll pay for all the wiring and have them install the wiring for us?" Well, at that time I could talk to the electric corporation because I was the biggest shareholder in the electric corporation in Newport. So I called Gene Rankin and I told him what I was doing and what we needed. And he said, "I gotta pass it to the board before it's accepted." They passed it to the board, and it was accepted. The electric corporation put all our electric in. The New England telephone put all the poles in. Then the electric corporation here put on done the wiring. And that helped us out an awful lot. But we built our camp through begging. And we begged enough, so we built a nice camp.
Do you still work with the Boys Club?
I'm still chairman of the Boys Club camp,
That's in Saunderstown.
Soundstown.
Now, you also work with the Newport Boys Club and also the Middletown, don't you?
Oh yeah, well, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
All in one.
Whoop.
It's all in one.
Hmm.
You spent a few nights over at the Boys Club camp too, didn't you?
What's that?
Well, I raised my 3 children at the Boys Club camp on weekends.
You said right.
Yeah.
I did. I would bring them over there because he was chairman. I would spend weekends when it was free there, and I would invite my father over as a babysitter. Well, he wasn't a very good babysitter.
Wasn't. No.
Were you?
No.
No.
I'm tired.
He would go to sleep, and the children would romp through the woods at night, and they rescued a group of Cub Scouts one night. My daughter was young, and another friend that was there, he was sound asleep, and 3 of the little Cub Scouts were lost in the woods, and this was about 10 o'clock at night. My daughter and this other young boy, and I'm talking 7 and 8 years old, took the Cub Scouts back through the woods, got them back to their Cub master, and he slept through the whole thing. Well, the next morning we were making breakfast, and I'm afraid the breakfast ended his career as sleeping over at camp. They happened to have a few large ants, quite large, crawling all over the place, especially over the stove as we were cooking. He took one look at the conditions and he said, "That's it, I'll see you all later." Also canoeing too. You went canoeing with the children to the what was that called? The herring run.
Yeah.
To the herring run.
How did you get to know Mr. Auchincloss?
Well, we had 3 canoes. We used to the kids once, so I stayed in the back and watched the 2 canoes in the front. And her daughter, Mary Jane, she was one of the little kids in the front canoe. And I was telling them to keep their boat straight, keep their boat straight. So they kept their boat straight and they got their boat in. When I got in, there's an awful current came on, twisted my boat, and I went right over. Did they laugh?
How did you get to know Mr. Auchincloss?
How did I get to know Mr. Auchincloss? Well, through the talk over the table at their dinner parties. And then I got a phone call from Ed Cochran. He says, "Louis," he says, "the Avenue is looking for somebody to head some of that project that they've got in mind. The first project is buying all the properties as they come for sale on the avenue." So quite a few have been destroyed. So And she says the next one is that they're interested in Goat Island quite bad. They want somebody that can trust in Newport. And they pick you. And now he says, the rest is up to you. You know what's coming. If they come to you, you know what to talk about. So I got a phone call and I went in, I met you. Mr. Buchanan was there. Howard Cushion was there. John Nicholas Brown was there. So we talked. And they said, what do you think? Can you give us the idea of why you buy so much property? Company Avenue, the people, we have dinners, we talk about you. You come from a poor family, and we know there was no money left to you. And no, whatever dollar I got, I earned. And so I says, what I earned it honestly, and I'm not afraid to work. I said, trouble with people, they want to make money, they don't want to work for it. Most people. But I says, my hours are no less than 12 hours, sometimes up to 18 hours a day. So I'm bound to make $1 working that way. So and I says, I've never given anybody a bad check. And that's all I can say. I can't tell you my parents are rich people, my parents are poor people. So they said, well, we're looking for somebody to oversee all this property on the avenue that's going to be sold, and we want to step in there and pick it up. I said, that would be good. The only thing, I can't put any money down because most of my money's tied up. They said, well, if it comes due, we'll put you on and you can pay it on time. So that didn't turn out because John West from, I think he was connected, I forgot who he was connected. He's the one that owns that gatehouse on Bellevue Avenue, and he owns a small house on Ledge Road, and he owns that fire station. Anyways, he was quite a cod shark, and he was a very sharp man, thought he was. And he used to play pool and play poker with Robert R. Young a lot. So somehow another party was formed by 5 of those, and they started to buy ahead of us. And that's how the Tennies got their belt caught. They had bought the estate as you go south on Bellevue Avenue. Forgot the name of the estate, but it's right next to Doris Duke. They bought that estate. It had a nice house on it, Hartford estate. And they were looking around at it, and first thing you know, Louis Larillard had bought.
Anything you say. So we'd stop right at 30.
Okay, finish that.
Well,
But we lot that bought what's that place that we found, Bellevue Avenue for tennis.
Belcourt
That's
Castle.
right.
Ford Manor.
But we lot that bought the Lippert, the
Belcourt. Belcourt.
Belcourt Castle. And so I saw them meeting together, and so they exchanged property. They exchanged property, and that's where the Tennys got their Belcourt Castle from an exchange of property, because that would fit the sleeve a lot better, because they like to create antiques. But not that they had any money, they didn't have any money either. The Tennys, they're just they're hard-working people.
What property did they exchange for that?
One next to Doris Duke.
The one next to Doris Duke, that was a Hartford estate.
Now, is that the Hartford of A&P?
Yeah.
I think we'll stop.
Okay.
Just turn that off.
Buy these properties before they came, as they came on. But there's another group that walked ahead of us, like West and Louis Laurelard and a few more. So I don't think they've done anything in that stage while they were on that, but they bought, but they never sell. And they couldn't sell. Like I explained to my group, there's only one thing you can do. Ooh, this is gonna be hot.
Is it too hot?
Bring that down a little bit.
Shall I?
Starting to sweat now.
Yeah, you feel all right?
Yeah, you're all right.
Do you feel it's too warm in here? Is it too warm for you?
I notice he's shaking.
I'll leave the front door open for a little bit to cool it down a little bit.
All right? You warm?
It's probably the fireplace fire.
Are you too warm?
You'll be all right in a minute, I imagine. It's cooling off now. It's getting awfully hot.
Is that too much draft on you?
No, not on me.
I'll just
I'm
turn this
fine.
off for a minute.
Bellevue Avenue to be bought.
I'm gonna turn the
All came about. Would you like to get into that one?
Yes, when we first got interested in it, that was Wally T. Buchanan. I was doing this work at the time.
On his home,
On
on
his
Bellevue
home.
Avenue.
Yeah,
What's the name of that, Boulier?
Beaulieu. So we're working on Beaulieu, and he was interested and was talking about it. I said, I got a carpenter here, he's got a boat. I said, we can hire his boat and go over the island ourselves without interfering with anybody. I said, then you don't have anybody around, you look around, you see what you want and what you want to do with it.
Now, at that time, that was the torpedo station that had
That was-
closed
that-
down.
Yeah,
All right.
that was before they built the crossway. Didn't I explain that?
Yeah, you did earlier.
I already explained that.
All right. Too bad.
Mm.
There's a washcloth if you'd like
Where
to.
were we in this? up in this part here?
Well, we sort of deviated. We were, had just finished up with Bellevue Avenue block. We had completed that story.
Yeah.
And then we had gone into Mr. West and transferring the property with the Tinnies.
Tinnies.
We had completed that story.
Well, that's as far as that goes.
All right.
It didn't go much further.
Would you like to go on? The next piece of property that you purchased was the Fraser Jelke Foundation, known as the Waves on Ledge Road, in May of 1954. Did you want to talk about that?
Okay. I received a telephone call from lawyer Cornelius C. Moore and asked me if I would be interested, that he had 4 pieces of property to sell. And he was going to give me first chance to take one or take them all. And then what happened is, after I bought the property, I bought the Waves, which was large enough for my financial at that time. And I went over and looked at the other 3, and they were nice pieces of property and they were reasonable, but I didn't want to take a chance on it.
Which were the other 3?
The other 3, one was the Wave was the first one. The other 3, the duplex that's on Ocean Drive, and it's called, oh, I forgot it. Today it's owned by Jelke, Bob Jelke. And the other one was bought by Bachelor. And I know the name of them, but I can't get them out. But there's 3 of them are together. They the first one abuts Teddy Grosvenor, which is right next to Hazard Beach. The second one, it looks like a garage. The garage goes with it. Then there's a big, beautiful house.
Normandy?
Huh?
Normandy?
And before Normandy, the one before Normandy. Normandy was owned by Strawbridge.
Strawbridge. That would be, one of those houses would be the one that Dr. Logler purchased.
Dr. Logler purchased the duplex.
Right.
And Strawbridge, another Strawbridge from New York, he bought it from Dr. Logler. And I've been doing this work there. He wanted to take, I told you about that one. He wanted to take the slate the roof off, the tile roof off, because too many tiles had fallen off. And he's had quite a few leaks. So I said, your leaks can be repaired. And your tile roof you can't buy. That's the most expensive roof there is. The only thing it needs to be repaired too. And I said, well, don't you let me make out a windstorm loss for you. whatever you get from the insurance company, and no matter what you put with it, would be well worthwhile. And he says, you can get me money from the insurance company. I said, yes. Well, that's all right. He says, go ahead. And I says, because those old tiles have been blown off by the wind, so that's their responsibility. So I arranged and got all his house pretty well tightened in. A lot of it he paid for because tiles, when you have a tile roof, it isn't like an asphalt shingle like this. They don't see it close together at the rake, so you have to fill up the groove with cement to match the tile. So I done that for him, and he liked it very much. Then he had some windows that were leaking. Well, that, I said, the insurance company will not pay for. And we'll have to keep that separate and give you a separate bill for it. So everything went right along, and the adjuster came in and talked to me, and I told him just the way I was doing it. And I told him what we were doing, that the insurance company weren't paying for it. That's not Winstone. He says, well, that's all right. You keep doing what you're doing. You're doing it all right. We'll pay for it. So then his roof used to get stained by seagulls. There was a wet roof, and they used to go there and stain it all white. I said, you want me to take care of that? He said, how you going to do that? And I said, I'll take care of it. So I ordered my men to put a copper wire over the ridge, so when they land, they hurt their legs, so they don't land there anymore. So we double the wire. They even broke that. There's so many that were landing. So we renewed the wire, and then we replaced it about 3 times. Now they stay off it. So he's got a nice clean roof. And that's about
Well,
all there is.
let's get back
that,
to
but
Connie
then-
Moore. Connie Moore offered you these 3 pieces of property, so you went back to the waves that you sort of liked.
Yeah, all I wanted was a wave. That's all I could afford to buy. But after I bought the wave, the papers were being filed. Boss Jelke decided that he wanted some of the furniture because his father had taken furniture from the warehouse that Waves had all their furniture in, and he wanted some furniture. So Mr. Moore says, call me up, said, Louis, don't do anything. He says, we're in trouble. I said, what's the matter? So he says, well, I said, Boss Joe, he's been in the office and he wants some of that furniture. I said, that's all right. Let him take all he wants. It's all appraised. And Johnny Jane appraised it, and whatever we take, we'll take it off the appraisal. I said, I'll bring you a figure of the appraisal so that you'll have it. And so I bought Connie Moore the figure of the appraisal. And then I met Boz Jelke and his wife over to the Wave, and they started to go through, and they had paper. Yeah, the owner was the architect.
Oh,
And who was that?
John Russell Pope.
And I think he made enough money on the few of the homes he built in Newport to build himself a nice home. He's the one that
He designed Bonnie Crest.
he's the one that was in He was one that was in charge of Bonnie Crest. And so on when he bought.
Well, let's go back to the original owner. The original owner of the Wave site was
No,
Governor
Lippett.
Lippett. Governor Lippett.
He owned the ground.
He
Right.
built a castle called the Governor Lippett Castle
Oh, on the site of the wave?
on the site of what is there now.
Oh,
I think he let it go. Or was there a fire in there?
When Governor Lippett owned Lippett Castle, that's what they call it. It was a landmark to the fishermen. One day we're out at sea, at the house they could see for their landmark. And Cliff Tallman always told me that. Cliff Tallman was a great friend of mine.
Is that Cliff Palmer? Palmer, did he say?
Tallman.
Tallman.
Palmer.
You think talking makes this cough worse?
I'm wondering. You want to just have a little rest and see if we can calm that cough down?
The architect, the owner, the builder, and you were talking about the castle that the fishermen used to...
yeah.
Mr. Tallman.
You need to bring in that cordless phone.
Is Mr.
Hold it again.
No, it's going. Go ahead.
Is
Okay.
Mr. Tallman the Tallman who ran Tallman's Fish Market?
That's right.
The same one.
Cliff Tallman. He was the owner of the fish market on Broadway. And he had a lot to do with the fishing shipments. And he was a very smart man. And he was a great friend. And we used to talk about the landmark. He says to me, he said, don't ever take the wave down. It's a good landmark now, but we had the best landmark was when the Lippett Castle was there. It was an ideal landmark for us when we were way out at sea. And he said, but we always come into Newport to the wave. That's the first thing we say. And we come into Newport. And I done work for him for a long time. But the owner at the time that had bought the Lippett Castle was John
John Russell Pope. John Russell Pope.
John R. Russell Pope. He was the man that bought it, and he's the man that changed it all around. Changed the roads, changed everything. And he done a beautiful job with it when he done it.
Did he tear down the old house?
He didn't tear it all down. A lot of the walls he left up because they were sound. A lot of the walls that are there in the basement now are the old walls. You can see the new walls. The new walls are made of cement, and the old walls are made of stone.
When was the old house built?
That I don't know.
It was in the
But there is,
1800s.
I have papers on it that give you
I-
the age. And I found some of those. And I can't tell you now, but I could give you the date on that later.
Now, John Russell Pope lived in this home, and he had a tragedy of his daughter being killed in an automobile accident on Bellevue Avenue.
That's right.
And shortly after that, he decided to sell the house.
No. A while after that, he got sick and he died. And his wife stayed into the house about 3 years. Then she decided to buy a smaller cottage in Newport and get rid of this one. So she bought Noveview. That Noveview, yeah. What's that one that I remodeled on Bellevue Avenue? The recent one.
The one after the fire?
Maylands?
Four Winds.
Four Winds.
Four Winds. She bought Four Winds on Bellevue Avenue. Now that's a funny thing. Four Winds was bought at auction by a man we call the Mad Russian. And he bought it for $39,000. And Mrs. Pope bought it from the Mad Russian, and she paid him $69,000. After she bought it, she called me to go and see her. So I went over to see her. She says, "How do you like my new cottage?" I said, "I don't like it. I think it's a lemon." She says, "What's a lemon?" Well, I said that in our phase, it's a house that's not that good. It's always repairs, it's got to be done to it. Well, she says, "I don't care, Mr. Chartier. It's going to last me my lifetime. I like the style, it's not too big. I had the elevators put in. So now what we're going to do is paint it, freshen it up, and that's it." I said, "Okay." So she gave me the job to freshen up the property. And done it for her. And then when she next thing, she about 3 or 4 years or 5 years later, she died. But first, the one that died about 3 years later, after she bought the cottage, was her brother. And her brother was Pembroke Jones. And he was the last one of the Pembroke Jones. That's where I have Sherwood. That was always owned by the Pembroke Jones.
Now, where is Sherwood?
Bellevue
That's
Avenue.
right.
Where on Bellevue?
right across. Stop it. Right across the street from Rosecliff.
And where is Four Winds? Where is Four Winds? Where is Mrs. Pope's house, Four Winds?
Well, Mrs. Pope's house, she owned her own house, and her brother lived in the main house. That's all he done. He
So
took
where
care.
is it located? Is it near the Elms?
It's just before Ravinsky Park.
Oh, Ravinsky Park, okay.
2 houses before.
The Sherwood faces Rosecliff on Bellevue Avenue, and Mrs. Pope Four Winds is
Right across from Barclay Douglas?
it's right across. No, it's the when
Dick.
you get down to Ravinsky ski park. If you don't make a curve into Burbank, you stay on Bellevue Avenue. It's the second house from the corner. It's painted kind of a yellowish, isn't that? What would you call it?
Yeah, it's a yellow now
yellowish color.
with black shutters.
When she bought that, when she died, her daughter stayed with her, but before she died, her brother died. And she approached me, and she says, you know, Mr. Chartier, my brother died. He's the last of Pembroke Jones. Now, we're going to sell the house. We want you to give us our first price on it. I says, I'm not in a buying mood right at present. It's all right, there's a key. Go and look at it. Give us the price. With furnishings and all. So, I went over and looked at it. She came back from New York a couple of days later. She called me and I went over to see her. She was a real businesswoman, very nice. And she said to me, she says, Bob, what do you think? Well, I says, I know one thing. I said, you've got a $900,000 contents that you have to pay on a valuation to the city. But with all that, I can only pay $150,000 because there's so much money to be spent to convert it that it's going to take a lot of money, and I haven't got that kind of money. I have to go to the bank. So she says, well, let me take your figure. I'll take your figure to New York with me. I'm going back to New York. And I'll come back in 2 weeks and I'll tell you if you bought it or if you didn't. So 2 weeks later she came back, she called me. And she says, there's the key, you own it. So I says, is there anything that you would want before? I'm not going to sell all the furniture. I said, I'm going to keep the nice furniture to keep the place looking well. I says, I'm only going to sell the low furniture, low class furniture that you have there. Maybe I have to throw in a few good pieces. But I'll bring a lot of my furniture that I want to get rid of. And I want to get that tax write-off on the contents. Well, she said, you know just what to do. It's yours now. Go ahead with it, whenever you want us to. Get together and pass the deeds. Give us a date. We'll pass the deeds. I says, well, at first I got to go down and get you a 10% deposit on your $150,000. And that's the proper way to do business. So I'll get you that and give you that, and that'll be the down payment. And the balance will be paid on whatever date we make. So, anyways, I got it all arranged, everything. And we pass on the property, and the following day we had an auction. And so we got about $75,000 or $79,000 of strip furniture sold. So I took the sheet of what Gustav White had marked down, and I went over to see Mr. Stein. I showed it to him. I said, we had an auction sale and we sold $75,000 worth of furniture. That was the furniture that was insured with. And you were taxing him for $50. So I said, I'd like to have that erased off the map. He says, okay. So that was that. Then I told her what we'd done and everything, and she says, well, you've always been fair. And she says, I want you to take care of this house as long as I live. And that's what happened to Pembroke Jones. And from there, I started on the Waves, which was their property, and he was a very shrewd and very smart architect. He built a beautiful building. When he built the building, he built it to stay.
But when you bought the Waves, you didn't buy it from the
Well, from Connie
Popes.
Moore.
It had been sold to Mrs. O'Donnell.
Well, first, yeah, that's right. First, when Mrs. Pope sold it, she sold the Wave to Mrs.
Barclay Douglas,
Mrs. Douglas.
who is now Mrs. Bryce.
And Mrs. Bryce sold it to Jelke.
Jelke. And Jelke converted it. Jelke's
The one that converted it
to apartments.
to apartment.
How many apartments?
See, I don't think he had too many, and they weren't very well laid out. And all the men that were working for him were working at day work, and I'd come over there to have to do something. Half of them were working, and I said, boy, this is going to cost some money, and Jelke's a tiger when it runs into too much money. So I didn't say anything, kept my mouth shut. And the time that they wasted, they could have put more perfection. And that's what I always see. I see they don't waste so much time. That's why I show up on a job 3 and 4 times a day. So, anyways, they done it that way, and that's the way it was, and that's the way I bought it. But as I went along, I changed the apartments the way I wanted it. And someplace like you take the garage, they had 4 garages, and the garage was heated up. And the tenants would go out in the middle of winter and leave the garage doors wide open. So I thought there's no money in that, heating the outside. So the following spring I built 5 garages. All they had was 4. And I put a nice garbage shed at the end of it out of cinder blocks. And then I told the tenants when the garage were ready and this everything done, I said, you're gonna have number 1 garage, number 2 garage, up to number 5. Number 5, there wasn't any that wanted 2 garage. So we kept those empty. So, then I took the garage and made an apartment out of it. And they said, why do that? Did you get a permit for that? I said, I always get a permit. Get a permit for everything when I do everything.
How many apartments did you make in the Waves?
Altogether, we own 10 now, and we made 12. Or is it
11.
13 with the
Well-
studio?
10 apartments and the studio makes 11
Yeah.
How's the studio a separate
separate.
building?
So that this was in, this was 1953, and this is the same house that when you were 19 years old, you put the roof on.
That's right. I didn't put the roof on. I worked on the roof.
You worked with your brother, never realizing back in those days that that you'd own it one day.
Have you ever had hurricane damage to the Waves?
What is this?
Have you ever had hurricane damage to the Waves?
Yes, we've had a little hurricane damage to the wave, and we had more damage to the shrubs than we had to the wave, like trees, lots of trees. In the 1954 hurricane we had there, there wasn't a man in the house, and they were all women, and even Mrs. Rocher was all alone. Her husband wasn't there. It seemed like as if all the men had to go to New York that day. And so I got there. And by the time I got there, one rock had already gone through. Mrs. What's this lady from New York that rented us for years? She was there when she hired the apartment from original. But anyways, she had water coming into her nice living room.
It was apartment 2.
Yeah, that was apartment 2. So I got down. I had a helper with me. We tied ourselves down with rope, and we crawled on the high spot around the building where the wind was in lee of the wind, but the wind was awfully strong. So we walked there until we got in to the entrance of the courtyard facing the storm. Then when we got there, I says, we can't go to the window only after a breaker comes in, and we can run and figure out for the second one to run back and back of the wall, because the breaker that came there would have splashed you against that stone wall. So I hurried up and measured the size of the window, measured a couple more, and then ran back and back of the wall, and the wave came over, so we got our way down cellar, and we cut some plywood to fit. And you could not carry the plywood. The only thing you could do is take the plywood, take the 3 sheets, and we slid it all along on the ground down to around the south side where the wave came in, breaking the windows. So we kept the wind there. I says, now you're gonna sit on this too. I'm gonna take one. And after the wave leaves, I says, I'll go down and put this one up. I'll put it up and I'll put the 4 nails here in the ground now so that it'd be simpler for me to put in. So when the wave let go, so I took the sheet and I ran and I put it up against the wall and I nailed it and nailed it and nailed more nails, and then I jumped in back of the parapet wall again and stayed there till that wave went off. Then I took the other one and done the same thing. Went to another window, but it wasn't broken. They were telling me water was going in there. So I nailed that one and I went in and hid, and then the next time I come back to the window and I talked to the people. Have you got any more? Yes, this one here is leaking. Well, I got one more sheet here. And when I ducked just before when I was in back of the wall, another big wave came up and brought a boulder about that big right through the window.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put the sheetrock up, and boy were they glad. So I looked at all the other windows. What I thought wasn't fastening up, a little loose. I put a nail against it. To hold it close. Then when I went in the house, oh, I can't forget. Her husband used to be a movie producer. And she was
Mrs. Preston Davies.
Preston Davies. Yeah. So she says, "You're a real hero." Says, "You better take a hot bath and go to bed, lady." I says, "I gotta want my wife to take care of. I've gotta use your phone." So anyway, I tried to call my wife and I couldn't get her again. That's the second storm that I couldn't reach the house. But I got there. So we left the wave. The women were all on. I left my young man I had with me so that they'd have somebody to wait on them in case they wanted anything. And I said, I've got to go to my wife. If my office should put a call through, tell them I'm going home. So I took the road that I thought wasn't the worst, and I drove around the city, far enough from the beaches, and I got home.
Now, you bought that house from Connie Moore. Did he have the house as the
I
bank?
bought it. No, Connie didn't buy it. Connie Moore was just the lawyer representing the
Jelke.
When Jelke died, the bank became the trustees.
Mm-hmm.
So Moore was the lawyer for the trustees.
Okay.
But before this happened, there was a story in there about Countess Kotzebue. Countess Kotzebue lived in France. She had apartment number 1 for about 20 years, and she never stepped foot in it.
Now we're through here.
All right.
Countess Kotzebue had this apartment, paid the rent on it, and the only one that ever visited was a nurse. She would come from France and spend a few months in the summer just to see how the apartment was used. And then one day, the Countess died. And so Mr. Moore called me up. He says, you know, he says, the Countess has an apartment in New York and one in Newport. New York is going to determine whether the estate will be settled in Newport or New York. So he says the Count is coming, and he promised that he would stay there about a month and a half. So the Count came in September. She died the early part of September, and he came in around the last of September. And so the Count came in and introduced himself to me, and I went around his apartment. I asked him if there's anything he wanted. No, he said everything is fine. I says, you good? Then you don't need anything. He says, no. But he says, one thing I need, more population. This is dead. This is dead. I can't take it. He says, is it that way all the time? No, it's very active. I says, all the people now are taking their children to school. So everybody, all the businessmen are going back to work. They're taking their vacation. So, well, he says, I'm going to go back to my New York apartment. So, I couldn't say anything, so Mr. Moore called me that night, because he used to call me every night to see how things was, because it was an awful big thing for him on the settlement. So he says, is the Count there? I said, he's been there for about 3 days. But I said, I don't think we'll see him over there over 5 days. He says, what do you mean? He says, Newport is dead. I said, why don't you make some activity so the Count can enjoy himself? So he says, well, you keep your eye and give me every detail, everything that happens. So one morning I landed there about 8 o'clock, and he was loading this Cadillac, this big Cadillac up with a chauffeur, and he says, I'm leaving. I says, you're going to be in the New York apartment? He says, yes. Well, I says, don't tell anybody for about a week. I says, and I'll try to manage this end. So I went in, I drove in, I told Mr. Moore what happened. Oh, he says, he'll never be settled in Newport now. He says, with no clothing there. I says, you know, the Count is the same size as I, and I got a lot of clothes. Would you leave everything in my hands and I'll take care of it? He says, Louis says, I got nobody but you to depend on. Well, don't say a word. I says, I'll keep calling as things progress. So every morning, I and my wife and the little girl, Pat Clibleyhan, used to drive her, and a cleaning lady would make breakfast for us in the morning, in case he should show up without any notification. So, about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got a phone call from C.C. Moore. He says, Louis, he says, they're coming in tomorrow. They're going to be in by 10 o'clock. And they should be there by 10:15, 10:30.
Now, who was coming in?
That was the lawyers, the investigators for the state of New York to see if this apartment in Newport should be declared a permanent apartment, or should the one in New York declared permanent apartment.
What apartment was this
Apartment 1
in the Waves?
at the way. So, I said to my wife, I said, bring a lot of bacon this morning. We're not going to have no egg, just bacon. I said, I want a lot of bacon smell this morning. So she brought bacon, and the cook sat down and ate with us, and Pat sat down and ate with us. Everybody was eating bacon. And I said, don't dare to open up one window until I tell you. So it come about 10:15, and I'm watching out. My wife says, I'm so nervous, I'm going out. I can't take this. She says, I'm going out. I said, you go ahead. You and Pat go out, and I'll stay here with the maid. So it's the maid. She was was Portuguese.
Mrs. White?
That was Mrs. White. I said, now, don't touch. I tell you when to touch. Don't open the windows. I'll tell you when to open the windows. And then I stayed down and stayed in the window and watched the window. Could see the car come up in the driveway. And around 10:30, 10:45, I see this big limousine come up. I says, that's it. Now, I says, you see the driveway? They're going to park there. When you see the stop there, stop. Don't hurry. Just open the windows nice and take your time. So I walked out on the porch when they drove in, and Mr. Moore says, good morning, Mr. Chartier. I said, good morning, Mr. Moore. Is the Count here? I says, you just missed him. He had a very important appointment in New York, and he couldn't wait any longer. So you must have seen him get on the plane, or else he wasn't there when you left from the airport. So, but he's gone to New York. But I said, he left all his clothes. So he started going in and looking at all the closets, all the clothes, and went in the kitchen. He just had breakfast. Yes, I said, he just finished breakfast, and I said, she's cleaning the dishes right now. And he says, well, I guess that's all we want from you, Mr. Chartier. I says, fine. I says, if you want me, Mr. Moore, call the office. They know where I'm at. And that night at 10 o'clock, Connie Moore called me up. He says, Louis, thank you for doing a marvelous job. This is a marvelous job. He says, you know what that means? That means that's going to be the highest income tax received in the state of Rhode Island since the tax has been imposed. And it means a lot. So, it means a lot to me to put that one over. He says, I shouldn't take the credit. You shouldn't be known and take the credit, but don't dare open your mouth.
Now, is that the highest income tax or the highest estate tax?
That's the highest estate tax
Estate
that was
tax.
paid to the state of Rhode Island. And
That's something.
and then there was something else. Oh yeah.
You sure that can be published?
No. So the next thing that happened is at that time I used to take care of Salve Regina. That's when Salve Regina was poor. And the Reverend Mother always liked me. And she always called me for advice. So about a month before I had done this, she called me and she wanted to know how they could save more money and how they could do it, because we don't know anything. Well, I says, what do you do with your money when you get it from the tuition? Well, we put it in our checkbook. You always put all of it on your checkbook. Yeah. So I said, we're going to change that. I says, put your girls on this week. Find out how much money you take when you open up, approximately. Find out how much money you need for the first 3 months to run your business, what you need in your checking account, what you spend. All you got to do is go into your checkbook, see what you spent last year. For 3 months, I looked at the year before, I mean 3 years. And so they called me up one night about 10 o'clock, so they wanted to see me. So I went down, sat down with them, and they had all the figures down. Well, I says, now, I says, the money's coming in. When it reached this figure, take the money and buy bonds with it, bonds that you can cash in right away when you need it, because when you need money, you're going to need it right away until you learn how to do it right. I says, because there's a lot to it, but you can make money with it. So, I got the telephone call from C.C. Moore. He said, I understand you changed all the transaction and all the funding of Salve Regina. He says, you know, the bank's going to lose a lot of money. I says, Mr. Moore, I said, the Salve Regina hasn't got any money. I said, it's hard for them to make both ends meet. That's why I'm doing it. And I'm going to do it that way, whether you like it or not. So he says, well, okay. Don't dig in too deep, so don't cost us too much money.
At that time, was Connie Moore president of the Newport National Bank?
Hmm?
At that time, was Connie Moore president of the
Yeah.
Newport National Bank?
Yeah.
That's why he was concerned.
Yeah, he always had the front seat there. And he worked for the bank, you can't blame him.
But wasn't it shortly after that
I think that's a good place to stop
Well,
tonight.
let me just finish this
Oh,
so we
okay.
can
Okay.
get Connie Moore into it. Isn't that where Connie Moore started to take over Salve Regina and take them under his wing?
Well, never that I knew of. He tried to advise them what to do best. And what Connie Moore done, he bought an estate abutting Swanahurst. And he gave the main house to Salve Regina for them, for the use it for the girls, for the dormitories.
Is that on Bellevue?
That's on, no, it's not on Bellevue, it's on, Shepherd Avenue. So, I went over and I done it all over for him. And the nun says, I don't know, we haven't got much money. Well, I said, I can find out how to get some money. So I went over to C.C. Moore. And I says, Connie, I said, I just left Moore Hall, they call it Moore Hall, and it's a real mess. And I think something should be done with it. Either they should own it this way or sell it, because they can't keep it up. He said, how much would it cost to fix it? Oh, I says around $250,000, not a penny less. I says the outside, the inside, everything is crummy. And I says it should be done. Well, Louis, I know why you're here. I owe you a favor. Well, Mr. Moore, I says, you know, if I do the job, that's Newport roofing. I said, I can't do it all for nothing. Well, he says, Louis says, I'm going to get a big fee out of what I got. But I'm not going to get it all in 1 year. Well, he says, suppose you go ahead and do your job. Let's call it $250,000. And I'll pay you half this year, and I'll pay you half next year. So, when I left the office from one bank to the nuns, I talked to the Reverend Mother, and I told her what I had done. Oh, she says, that's enough. Come over and have dinner with us. You're going to sit at the head table, and you're going to explain to all the nuns just what you've done.
Do you remember her name, Reverend Mother?
I remember Reverend Mother Rose, Sister Mary Rose, was the one that used to contact me. Reverend Mother, I don't only meet
No,
her personally.
It was Sister Mary Rose you did all the work
Oh
with.
yeah, she done all the work there. She worked so hard for that church, for that
Yeah.
school. So they were ready for luncheon, so they brought me and sat me right in the middle next to Sister Mary Rose, and the other side was Reverend Mother. And Reverend Mother was getting quite old. And Reverend Mother got up and she says, this one I've got to say. We have a gentleman with us, Mr. Chartier, which you all know. You see him around doing the work around. He finally got Mr. Moore to paint all the interior, the exterior, and repair everything that needs to be repaired. at the Moore Hall. They all got up. They were just like kids. And then Sister Mary Rose and Reverend Mother had me walk all around the hall with them. So I said, no, I said, you got me so excited, I'm not hungry. So, anyways, we done the job for them. C.C. Moore paid just the way he said he would pay. He gave his word. His word was his bond. He was a wonderful friend to have with me, anyways. He was a wonderful friend. When he found out that I'd be doing something wrong, before I got too far, he always got the wing of it from one of the executives in the city. And he always called me, Lou, you're doing something wrong, you better not do that, you're going to get pulled in. So, and something told me it was wrong. I said, look, it isn't wrong. And at the beginning of the war, the Navy sent an awful lot of ships. And a lot of officers. And a lot of officers. So these officers had wives and children. So they came over the road, and the officers came by sea, so they came about a week or two ahead of the officers or more. So, got it right into the papers that they were finding Navy families sleeping in the car for weeks. So, I said, I've got one big estate, the mainland I had bought. I hadn't converted that, I left it just the way it was I had. And I happened to talk to to Captain Miller again. I just said, you know, I said, it's a shame that we don't do something for these Navy families that picked up on the road at night sleeping in cars. He says, what can be done? Well, I says, I've got one big estate with about maybe 25 rooms, bedrooms, and it's got a very nice kitchen, and it's got everything there. In one of those mothers we could find a mother to run the house. I'd be willing to let them come in and use it, you know, they used it properly. So you got some officers worked on it, and when the police officers would pick up a car with children in it, sleeping, they'd call the shore patrol, and police officer would land over to my house, wake me up, I'd get dressed, I'd go down there and we set them up. Finally, I had 28 families. Well, we're not supposed to have over 2. Because when it's a dwelling, you can't house over 2 families. So, I got a phone call from the city solicitor telling me that I was going to be taken to court, and on account of what I was doing, because they were told that I was getting paid high money by them. So went along, and the first thing that I done, I just kept quiet, and I told people, don't let anybody in that you don't think are desired people to come in. They have no business in. So it got tougher and tougher, so finally it landed into the Board of Review. So the day it landed into the Board of Review, some of the ships came in. And so then the naval architects and the ship's captain and all of them, they all got together and we had a meeting in the afternoon. And they says, well, what do you got to say? I says, I haven't got a thing to say except that I pick up your wife and your family and I put them in there. I says, free of charge. All they have to do is buy their groceries. And I didn't want to see them in the street. So when they got in to the meeting of the chamber of the council, and they let them talk, then law officers of the Navy woke up and got on their back. And it says, there's a man that has a lot of conscience and a lot of experience, and he's a very good-hearted man. He's taken his whole building, and he says he's paying for the gas, the electric, and the taxes while the people are living in there. And he's not charging them a nickel, so they all pop back. He says, we understand that you got paid plenty. Well, these are the ladies here, and the ladies can tell you. How much rent did you pay Mr. Chartier at the time that you were housed in Mayland? We weren't asked a nickel, we never paid a nickel. And so then they couldn't do anything about trying to close me up. But they said, how long do you think this will last? I said, I can't answer this. I says, the Navy can answer it. I says, as far as my thought, now if the Navy ships are in, it should take no more than a month before they place them. And but it came out in the newspaper. There was an awful write-up on it. And so I didn't go to jail. Breaking the law.
This is just at the end.
During Korea, 1950.
All this was activities that we had at Mayland in 1950.
Bartholomew?
No. Richard Barthelmess. He was a silent movie
Yes,
actor.
I do.
Sure.
He was a great friend of the Wymans.
Who lived in Maylands.
And he always visited every year for the Christmas party, but he'd be there about a month or so. And he was a great guy to talk to. And at last he died of cancer of the throat.
Wasn't he a real pretty boy? Richard Bartholomew.
Before me. I don't...
Well, you don't remember. Okay. Yeah, I think
His
that's...
wife and Mrs. Wyman were great friends.
Well, now, where I'd like to start this morning, but I don't care, but we started to talk about the house down around the corner that's got the archway and the gatehouse, and during the hurricane, the incident that happened.
Normandy. Normandy, when Mr. Strawbridge lived in Normandy, and the hurricane was hitting and the water was coming up.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell that story about
Well,
the...
yeah. Well, this was the day after the hurricane.
Now, which hurricane was this?
38.
No.
This is
No.
a
No.
hurricane of,
I'll tell you in a minute. 60, somewhere around 62, or before that, because that's when they purchased Ledge Road, the apartment at the Waves 1 and 5, so it was somewhere before that. What
well,
hurricane?
It didn't take long. Couldn't have been. Should have been around 61. It was nothing but a high tide. It wasn't a hurricane. It was nothing but a high tide, a high rise of tide. And the tide tide raised high and the water was coming in the house, so he chased the servants home and he talked with his wife and so he went over and got himself a big bottle of scotch.
This is Mr. Strawbridge.
He went in the gatehouse and stayed there all night long.
Where was Mrs. Strawbridge?
I'm going to raise myself so I can stop myself from talking.
Going higher? You really want to sit up?
No, maybe it's my seat. It's too low. Try it that way. And
Get a cup of hot water.
he got himself anyways. Are we on?
Yes, we're on.
Yeah. Bottle or two. And he went in the gatehouse and he confined himself into the gatehouse and stayed there and left Mrs. Strawbridge all alone all night on the second floor with the water running through her living room and everything. And she was all alone up there. She was frightened to death. So the next morning, when it cleared up so she could go out and walk out, she picked up the phone was running, called a taxi, and she went to the Viking Hotel. She hired a room. When she was settled, she called me. She says, Mr. Chartier, you got anything empty at the Waves? I says, in what size apartment? In a nice apartment. Yes, I said, I have two. I have the apartment where Countess Kotzebue just died, and that's vacant. And then I got the apartment up above it. So she says, I'd like to look at them. Well, I says, all right, don't call no taxi. I said, I'll pick you up. So she looked at these two apartments and she took photographs. But she wanted a kitchen downstairs and a kitchen upstairs. Well, I said, they practically made. I said, the kitchens are there, but you didn't see them. So she says, okay, I want these two apartments. I don't care if Clayton stays out there, I'll stay here. So So she hired the apartment. I wouldn't sell them to her. So for years, they stayed in the two apartments, and him and this drinking. Every time he got over to a party, they'd kid him about him losing the apartments that the property were going to be sold. So one day I needed some money, and this old couple came to the office and asked me where they could build a nice house on a nice plot of land that I had. So I just shown them the land at the wave, and I showed open up a plan of a house that would make a nice house to fit on that plot. And I gave them the price on it, and that's all it was. And next morning, who called me up is C.C. Moore. And C.C. Moore says, "Louis, are you selling any part of the waves?" Well, I says, "I intend to." I said, "I'm remodeling Roselawn, and I'd rather get sold a piece of land and pay for Roselawn than borrow from the bank." So he says, "Well, don't sell it right away." He says, "I've got clients that wants it, very nice people." So that went on. And then first thing you know, Clayton Strawberry came back to Mama over to the wave after she moved in. And he said to me, he says, "Louis, I want to buy these two apartments." I said, "You do?" I said, "I can't sell them to her. I said, the law won't permit me to sell them to him. It hasn't gone by yet." Well, I said, "Let's make it go by." I said, "Don't be in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry to sell. You're a good tenant." I said, "I'd rather have your money by the month than have it to you pay for it, and then you know more money coming in." So, one night, they went to party, and Barclay Douglas and Whitey Buchanan sat next to him. All night long they grilled him. They said they know that I was selling the waves and he was going to get put out. They got him all excited, and it was not true. So 2 o'clock in the morning, calls me, wakes me up. Him and his wife was crying over the phone that they want those apartments the worst way. So he says, "Louis," he says, "I didn't sell my Normandy." He says, "I'll give you my Normandy for $62,000. I'll give you my Normandy for $62,000 in trade. What would you sell the apartment for in trade?" "Oh, about $125,000. Oh, he says, "You wouldn't charge me that much, would you?" Well, I says, "I don't want to sell it. And if I don't want to sell it, then you got to pay for it." So everything was going along fine. So I said, "It's all right, then we're going to buy it." "Oh no, I didn't say I was going to buy it. I didn't say I was going to sell it." And I didn't say I was going to buy a Normandy. So it would have been a good exchange if I'd have taken it. But my wife didn't like it on account of water going through. And I said, I'm not buying that, but put you there and put you in Roselawn, put you all over. I said, I'm not giving you that many pieces of property. I said, if I buy that, I buy it for speculation. I'm going to sell it again. So I said, what would you like? Would you rather have Normandy than have Roselawn? She said, no, I'd rather have Roselawn. Well, I said, then keep quiet. That's a business deal. So, anyways, they've had another party and somebody else got after him. And they says, I saw him with a man with plans over there. And I'm sure he's selling you out. So again, 2 o'clock in the morning, he calls again. That was on a Saturday morning. And Mrs. Strawbridge was crying. Well, my wife said, well, we'll get dressed and we'll come down and see you right away. 2 o'clock in the morning, we got dressed and we went down to see Mrs. Strawbridge at the way. And she says, I don't want to move from here. She says, I love this place. And she says, I don't care what you charge him. If he doesn't pay for it, I'll pay for it. I says, look, I says, I'm not out to take anybody. I says, I've never sold part of my property and I hate to sell it. I know you'd be wonderful people to do business with, but I don't feel as though, let me think about it. So anyway, she was crying on my wife's lap, and my wife comes to me, she says, Pop, why don't you sell him the property? It's only a piece of property. And I like the lady. She said, I like to come over, talk to her. And she was so kind, and she was built just like my wife. And made a nice little pair of chicken. So, anyways, I said, okay. I said, I'll let you have it. And I'll let you have it without taking a Normandy. And I'll let you have it for $100,000. As I should charge you $150,000. So, so just like that, he says, what lawyers are going to use? Well, I says, I use C.C. Moore, or I use Sheffield. Well, he says, you use Sheffield, and I know. I said, I'll use C.C. Moore, and you use Sheffield. I said, that's how I bought this building through, and I said, that's who I want to follow with. And we no sooner get started. So he gave me $20,000 right there on a deposit. No papers, just a $20,000. So when we were passing, and the son started to bring this down and bring that down, and I went over and told his father, I says, we tell Richard to keep his big mouth shut. First thing you know, he says, he'll have me quit, stop the sale. And I says, there's nothing wrong with anything here. So he went over and told Richard to keep his mouth shut.
Richard was his
And,
son?
Miss Sheffield.
He told Richard that's his son.
His son.
He's a lawyer. He was there. So he told Richard to keep quiet. And everything went through, so Robert gave me a check for $80,000. He says, "No," he says, "nobody will ever throw me out of here."
But what happened to you with the city of Newport? What happened to the both of you on that sale with the city of Newport? Your
Nothing.
taxes.
Oh, well, the city naturally raised taxes to the purchase that he bought, that one pot that he bought, that was 1/5. And then, if it was 1/5, so they charged him $60,000 on valuation. He had to pay tax on a $60,000 valuation. And they raised my valuation 5 times. So I said to the city, I says, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm going to have to take you to court." I said, "All apartments are not like that." So I took the city to court and I beat them in court because they had upped my tax 5 times. So now they brought it back, and I made them put back to what I wanted it, because the judge was on my side. So that was all right. That went off with that. And Clayton Strawbridge owned the house, and he left it in a trust. It's in his trust, and his daughter cannot sell it, or anyone in the family can sell it.
Mrs. Strawbridge is not living?
Hmm?
Mrs. Strawbridge is not living?
No, she died before my wife did.
It's now left.
Billy says he needs to talk to you for a minute.
Okay, can you hold it?
Yes,
Sure.
sure.
Where this is, and then
That was
In,
a piece of land that I bought from him.
in 1947, you
Yeah.
purchased a piece of land from John Nolan on the corner of Red Cross and Memorial Boulevard.
I paid $5,000 for that, and the reason why he was trying to sell it because they had put so much restrictions on it, and I never looked at the restrictions. And I come to start building, so when I look at the restrictions, I couldn't build what I wanted on it. So I just kept quiet. And about 10 years later,
Sold it to Nathan Estes.
Estes, yeah. Sometime later, Estes called. He wanted to buy it and donate it to the Masonic, and built a new hall there. So I said, "How much you want for it?" I says, $10,000. He says, "Okay, I'll take it." So I sold it to him for $10,000.
But isn't that the land that the Aquidneck Medical Center abuts?
No, they abut,
It
yeah.
abuts. Now, I understand in the paper not too long ago, they're going to build some apartments on that land now.
Well, maybe the man that had put the restrictions died, and the people that control the restrictions have weakened to him, and God knows what could happen.
Now that's right across the street west from the little yellow house where Dr. Schaefer lives.
Yes. Dr. Schaefer?
George Schaefer.
Oh, George. That's that one.
George Isidore Schaefer.
That's
It's
that
right
one.
on the corner, Red Cross Avenue,
Right.
and Old Beach Road.
Oh, I thought it
And
was
Red
Memorial.
Cross Avenue
No,
and
Red Cross and
Memorial
Memorial.
Boulevard.
Then, around that same time, You also purchased a plot of land on the corner of Annandale Road and Annandale Terrace.
Annandale Road and Annandale Terrace. That's where you live. That's where I built the
Where
house.
you built two houses.
Built two houses. I sold one to the Lippitt's,
Dave Lippett.
hey, Lippett, and the other one I put you in there.
Should I just turn this off for a minute?
Of that house.
Well,
Who built it?
Okay,
for years, the house,
tell what house it is.
The Playhouse.
the house has no cellar,
Right.
and it's a good thing. And because whenever we have a moon tide, like Strawbridge, she has it shut off, huh?
No, it's
going.
on.
It's going.
It's on.
Yep.
We have a moon tide like Strawbridge had, and the water picked up, that's all. No. Well, the same thing happened to this house. If the water picked up too high, it came up into his house. And Mrs. What's her name, had that for quite a few years. She bought it. She was a little wacky. I've done so much work for her, but I forgot her name.
Who built the house?
Hmm?
Who built the house?
Oh, I don't know who built the house. It was built before I came into Newport. And I don't know who built that house. I didn't have much to do. At any time, I didn't want to buy it if it was for sale. And the only deal that I had on it, the spread of Laughlin came to me in that time. And I sat on the board of directors at the Plantation Bank. And he asked me if he thought Plantation Bank would go for a mortgage with him on. I said, I don't see why not, Frank. Fred, I says, because I says, your type of business, I says, it's hard to refuse you. I says, because you're fine, your credit is right tops. And I can't see how the bank would refuse it. If you want to, I'll put it in. But want a point of advice from me? I said, I wouldn't buy that house if you gave it to me. Yeah, I says, they've always had trouble with high rise. Well, he says, we're going to fix that up. So he bought the house and he stayed there many years. Better Lobson. And he liked it. So finally, I don't know what happened. The house was sold. And somebody else bought it, and this man spent quite a lot of money on it. And I don't know what it's about as much as I know about the house.
Did you ever know Mr. James, who was connected with the Pennsylvania Railroad?
No?
Never heard of him.
I may have met him, but I don't recall it.
Right about this time now, Dad, you, in 1947, in fact, December of that year, you purchased from Percy Breitman your shop, your existing shop now on 17 Vernon Avenue.
Oh,
No, I'm sorry, that wasn't. That was the house that was just the house, 17 Vernon Avenue.
That's right. That's right. That was just the house that I purchased because he was moving. He'd taken his mother to a better house and gave me first refusal on it. So I bought the house from him. and that's the house that your son owns today.
Right.
Now, is that Brightman connected with William Brightman of the Newport National?
Yeah, I don't know what he done.
Then in 1948, you purchased the Robinson House on the corner of A. Ralt and K from Sanderson Cushman.
He told about that house.
All right.
Had some apartments that he had people in.
All right. Let's see. You 1951. You bought some lots from George Robinson. You paid $400 for a lot on Keir Avenue.
Oh yes, he just came over to me. He needed the money, and he wanted $400 for the lot. So I just gave him a check for $400 for the lot. And then my Frazier that used to cut the grass.
Frank Freitas.
That used to cut the grass for us was talking to me. He said, "Do you know where I could buy a piece of land just to build a house to keep my men busy for the winter?" He says, it's too expensive, and then I lose them if I don't keep them busy in the winter. So I said, "Frank," I said, "I got a nice lot. I'd let you have it cheap." So I sold him the lot for $800. I just double the money, and that's all.
Now comes Mapleshade. That was on the corner of Old Beach Road and Red Cross Avenue. In 1952, you purchased that from Sturtevant Leroy.
Yeah. Sturtevant Leroy French.
French, right.
French. He's the father to the girl that married what's his name? He was a famous he was so famous that he used to take out a big, he owned that house and they lived there on corner Ruggles Avenue and Bellevue Avenue. The house that burnt down.
Can't bring it around.
Hmm?
I can't bring the name around.
I know Wu used to come up, but nothing. I've known him, I met him, I talked with him, I worked for him. Anyways, the father went to the bank and he wanted to borrow the money from the bank to do something with the house. And the bank advised him against it because of his age and not knowing anything about it. He'd have to depend on everybody, and it would cost him too much money. And so they recommended that he sells it to me. Mr. Chartier will buy it. You'll do a nice job of it, you'll be pleased of it, you'll get your money and you'll be out. So, I bought the house from him, went to the bank and met him, bought the house from him. And when we transferred, he had a mortgage in the savings bank. And those days, you didn't have to depreciate your mortgage like you make it depreciate today. Today you pay so much monthly against your mortgage, And those days you paid just the interest.
One.
He could have bought 2 houses. He could have bought 2 houses for the amount of interest he had on. He had the mortgage on there for over 50, 60 years. So Ed Cochran figured it out with me. And we says, yes, this is different today. I says, they make you amortize your mortgage. So, and with me, I never bought any house. I never took any mortgage, no matter what size, for no more than 10 years. I made all my mortgage paid up 10 years.
Why did you do that?
Because that goes by fast, and it forces you, makes you work harder to meet your payments. And that way in 10 years goes by fast. That's the reason why I always bought my house the way I did. And the banks used to like to do business with me. So I bought that and I turned that into 10 apartments. That's what we had in there, 10 apartments. And we kept it for many years.
You also, on the land, built a duplex house.
We had extra land, so I built a nice duplex house. And Jim Dwyer's sister was looking for a house and she couldn't find what she wanted. Well, I said, Jim, I said, I got the house she wants. If she wants to buy it, I'll give her a good price on it. So we went over and looked at it. She fell in love with it. So when I told Jim how much. I said, the reason why I'm selling it at this price because I do so much business with you. I says, so they grabbed it right away. And then after that I sold the main house, but many years afterwards.
To George Cardoza.
To George Cardoza.
Who was Jim Dwyer? Was he Francis Dwyer's father?
That's what,
Who was Jim Dwyer
Jim Dwyer?
that you sold the duplex to?
Jim Dwyer, it wasn't Jim Dwyer. You done all the paperwork, but it was for his sister.
Catherine. Catherine Dwyer bought it.
Yeah, not Jim.
But who was Jim Dwyer? Was he Francis Dwyer's father?
Yes.
Oh.
Lived out on Paradise.
You lived on your street.
Right.
Now we're coming up to 1952. In April of that year, from a Mary Jennings, you bought Maylands.
Yeah.
Have we done that? That's on the corner of Bellevue and Ledge Road. Now you had to do a great deal of work on this house to change it into apartments.
Oh, that's the house that I had. I didn't have no trouble with it, but I let it stay there for a while. I bought it, paid for it. Then I didn't convert any part of it. Then about 2 weeks after I bought it, I had no view.
And no view was on the same piece of property.
Yeah, no view. The carriage house and the coal bin. It was a coal bin, but you made an artist room out of it.
And a tiny little cottage.
Yeah, a little cottage. And there was those 4 pieces of property. So Bobby Phelps that worked for Gustav White came to me and he says, Louis, he says, I got a buyer for no view. I said, you have? So he says, yep. I said, how much? He says, he'll give you $20,000 as it is. I says, okay, I'll take $20,000 as it is. So I sold him, except by 1 piece. I says, 1 piece. Jim Dwyer wants us. There's a beautiful little disc in there, and Jim Dwyer wants that disc. I want that disc to be delivered to Jim Dwyer. And I gave Jim Dwyer the disc. And he sold the house. I only paid $25,000 for the whole of it, and I sold just the cottage for $25,000. So all I had invested was $5,000. So I let it stay that way for a while, and then what happened? That was the time that we had. I don't know if I said it in here. I don't think I did. About the Navy maybe moving in town. Yes.
Yes, you
Yes.
told that story,
Well,
right.
that comes into that house.
Into
Okay.
this house.
That's in there. And then the first one that I took the carriage house. I made that into 2 apartments, and I made a storage room for the
Furniture.
Chartier real estate furniture, and we used it very nice for years. Then quite a few years later, then the daughter of Mrs. Seller wanted to buy it, so I sold her that house for $59,000.
That was Malin's?
That was
No.
the carriage
Oh, the
house.
carriage house.
And you sold, wasn't her name Martha Bacon? Was the daughter's name Martha Bacon?
Yeah,
Was
that name
Mrs.
was
Seller's daughter.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I sold the studio to Mrs. Seller for $28,000. And then I sold the main house to Ralph Gunning,
Harry Casey.
Harry Casey.
Is that the sheriff?
Harry
Yes.
Casey.
That was a syndicate, really, with them. For about 5 of them or something.
No, I don't believe so.
Is that the same group that eventually bought Hammersmith?
No. Well, he had
He was in on that.
Harry Casey had something to do with the Hammersmith farm,
But
too.
it was a single deal here.
Yeah.
But in Malan's, Dad, you had 3 rather exclusive apartments.
Very.
And you had a Mrs. Louise Vanderbilt in one. You had Mrs. Hoffman.
Yeah,
You know?
Harold Hoffman. They ran a dye place in Providence, and they had a home. They had a home in Florida, and they had an apartment in New York, and a home in Providence. Another home where Hamley's funeral home is. That was the Newport home. So they were coming back from Florida one year, and the husband choked on a piece of steak on his way back. She lost her husband. And then it changed all her life again. So then she started to talk about, I'm getting rid of my Florida apartment. But since I got nicer furniture in my Florida apartment that I'd like to bring out here, but I can't get enough money for it. Well, I says, that's simple to arrange. Why don't you take furniture that you got in your Providence apartment, put it in Florida, and send your Florida furniture here. She says, and what am I going to do with all the furniture I got here? Well, between your Florida furniture and your Newport furniture, furnish this apartment. Then send the rest of it to Park Bernay. And I says, you'll come out very well that way. Well, you'll be satisfied. So she says, well, she says, I need you for that. She says, I've got to take you to Florida with me. She says, you don't need me to go to Florida. So, anyways, I won, and she done it just the way I wanted. And she come out about $60,000 a head. And she says to me, she says, thanks for the advice. It was very good. I didn't have to buy a piece of furniture, and I got $50,000, $60,000 left over. So she was always a very she was always a very, very nice woman to talk to. I remember one night I was doing the carriage house for Mrs. Brochet on Bellevue Avenue. I think I may have given you that, or I may have told you that stuff.
I don't think so.
No?
No.
So, Mrs. Brochet decided to take the carriage house next to Buchanan at Bowyer. And so I was doing that over for her, but every time she ordered anything, I used to make her sign a paper and put the picture showing what she wanted, and make her sign her name. And
Now, who is this you're
Dave.
talking about?
Mrs. Brochet,
Mrs. Octavia Prochet.
yeah. She's a lady that she'd give you an order. When she'd walk out of the house, she forgot to give you, she had given it to you. So I said, I can't work for you unless you sign every item that you buy. And I says, I don't want no trouble. If there's any trouble, I'll cut it right out. So Ray Basil was a foreman on the job. I said, everything that she wants, and she wants extra, make a sign.
Now, this all came about. She was a tenant of ours at the Waves.
Yeah.
And while she was a tenant, you purchased part of Wiley T. Buchanan's Bellevue, or did you buy the whole thing?
I bought the whole estate.
The whole
I
estate?
bought it from Coates.
Coates. I don't have that.
I bought it from Coates. Coates bought the estate. And he was trying to remodel it for himself. But he was so rude that the Avenue never accepted him. But they accepted his wife. He got so mad, he tore everything in value out of the house and brought it into New York and sold it to the dealers. Because how I know is, I bought the same picture that were in the house from the dealers. And we went into Redwood Library and we got booklets on it went into historical and got booklets on it. And Buchanan says, look, it's the same damn fireplace. Well, I says, glad this guy in New York never moved him. So, anyways, Mr. Buchanan had gone to New York himself to look for him, and he brought back the pictures of the fireplace of the one that he wanted. He wanted 5, but there were 3 that looked exactly like the fireplace that were over there. So I said, don't buy them. I said, for the 5 fireplace, they wanted a little over $9,000 for them. So I left about a month later, and I went to New York, and I bought the same fireplace from the same pictures, plus 2 that practically fitted in there beautiful, better than what he had, and 2 more for myself, a Louis with 15th that I put into Roselawn. And I bought those for $5,000, a whole 9 of them. He was buying 5 for $9,000. I bought 9 for $5,000. So I went to the hotel and called them and told them that the deal that I made, I bought his fireplace. He says, how do you do things like that? He says, I tried my best to get those fireplaces cheaper than that, and I couldn't do it. Well, I said, I've been buying fireplaces from these people for years. So I said, I got a special discount. So it wasn't only that, they had to move. They were on the verge of urban renewal. We were going to pull down their building. They had to get them out of the way, and that was the best thing they could do with it. So he says, I'm putting a check in the mail right now for $5,000. I'll pay for all the fireplace. You keep your 2, but you do all the transportation. I says, that's okay. So that's when I sent John Caraway down to New York with the big flat bed, and I gave him all kinds of gasoline, extra cans to tie on a strut in case he ran out of gas. And even of them got them, and we burned. Today they're in, and you'd swear if you look at the original, these are original.
What year was that?
1961.
Now, you originally bought Bellevue, and then you sold it to Mr. Buchanan?
No, I didn't. I didn't buy it.
You didn't buy it.
Yeah, in a way I did. Because it was my check. It's my check that paid for the fireplaces.
No,
No,
the estate.
Oh,
You bought the estate
yeah.
from Mr. Coates?
Yeah, well, I bought the estate when
it's Coates Thread Mill.
Right.
Coates found out that he wasn't accepted on the avenue. He got so mad he stripped the house, and then he put the house on market. So he got no bid from nobody. So one real estate agent came over to me, he says, Louis, he says,
Captain Tiernan.
huh?
Captain Tiernan
Yeah, Mr. Tina,
from Gus White.
just away. And he says, Louis, he says, he's desperate. I says, okay, tell him I'll give him $20,000 for it. So, went over to him with the offer, $20,000, and he took it. So,
And it was in
62.
it was around 62 that Wiley Buchanan came in and purchased the main house and the gatehouse leaving the stable to you,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
You took the stable,
Yeah,
and that's where Mrs. Prochet comes in.
that's right.
You redesigned the whole stable for Mrs. Prochet.
That's right. And I made the nicest small house on that avenue.
Gorgeous.
Over there. What a beautiful job.
Gorgeous.
She still got it?
Well, Mrs. Prochet died maybe 15 years ago, or more than that,
Yeah.
and then you sold that to Felicia Dewey
Yeah, Mrs. Dewey. she's
in
still
1969.
on. That's right, Mrs. Dewey.
Now, didn't Mr. Buchanan delegate you to redo the whole mansion, redecorate it and put
I
in this?
done everything in there that had to be done to the mansion to set it up right. Like on a decorator, he'd pick rebar out of New York. And so I and my wife would have meetings, and my wife would stay in the back but watch out what was going on. That's how she got to be such a good decorator. She learned from copying from these decorators. So Rebar told me that he just moved into a new place, and he invited me down to see it, come over and spend a weekend with my wife, but we never got to it.
Isn't it true that in one of the rooms they put wallpaper up, and Mrs. Buchanan didn't like the color of one of the flowers in the wallpaper, and our painter, Walter Ramsey, had to go through the whole room and recolor one of the flowers?
Yes. First she started, I don't like that, and she talked with Walter, and Walter mixed her a color, and she liked the color. So she started to do it. She'd done it for about 3 days, she got nowhere. She says, I can't take that anymore. Will you have Mr. Ramsey finish it? So,
Now, if I remember correctly, it's not very important, but that you told us that your contract with Mr. Buchanan was about $285,000 to redo the house. Is that about?
I didn't have no contract with him. When I talked with him at the gatehouse, and I sold him a house there, and the gatehouse was completed then. He says, will you do the same kind of work on the main house as you do on this house? I says, look, I don't do two kinds of work, I only do one kind. This is the only work I know. If you want better than that, I can't give it to you. So he says, well, I'm well satisfied with your work. Will you do the work for me if I buy the main house? I says, I'll do it, one condition, that you pay your bills every month. I says, when we mail you the bill, we'd like to get our money within 10 days so we can pay our bill. Oh, he says, that'd be all right. So he was, first he was a little funny to work with, but you got used to him. He was a great guy. I became very friendly. As a matter of fact, he says to me, one night they were going out, he and his wife. I got a phone call here. And he says, will you come over to the house right away? He says, my wife's best jewelry's in the safe, and he or me or her cannot open that safe. They were too nervous. So I said, okay, I'll come over. So I took the same combination they had, and I just took I said, you stay downstairs, I don't want you upstairs bothering me. So I went up, opened up the safe, and after it was open, I said, the safe is open for you, Mrs. Buchanan, take what you want. And they look at me and they laugh, both of them. And he says, you know, he says, when I die, I'm going to put him on my will that he has to look out, oversee everything.
Now he's
But he
still
was a great guy. His daughter was in college at the time he bought the house. And we were finishing a lot of the house when she graduated. And he says to me, he says, will you go to the college and get her jewelry box? Because she'll leave that hanging around. Well, I was so busy, I had George Roderick working for me. I sent him down to get the box. He brought it down and says, hey, he says, open it. There was everything in there. There must have been $150,000 worth of jewelry in that box. And all scattered. He says, you know, he says, all those kids, every one of their room is sloppy, their jewelry's all over the place. He says, I never saw anything like it.
what college?
Gee, I forgot.
Now, Mr. Buchanan was chief of protocol at that time in Eisenhower's
That's right.
administration.
Yeah.
Right. Tell the story about
I
his,
think we better quit.
is that
It's
right?
10 after 10.
Yeah, I've got to get moving. How much time do we have on?
We've got maybe 5 minutes.
All right, tell him the story about Charlie, Mr. Buchanan's son-in-law or son.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Buchanan wanted to bring his son and daughter and the grandchildren to Newport. But Charlie, his son-in-law, didn't want to have anything to do with it because he says he didn't want to hang around the beach. He says, get me a job in my line and I'll go down. So he says to me, he says, look, put him on your payroll and I'll give you his pay. We want him down here. I said, if I put him on my payroll, he's going to have to work. So if he works and if he does his job, he gets paid. So that's all there is to it. You owe me nothing. So anyways, I put Charlie. He was about a 6'2", and the nicest guy you could meet. And every morning he got in the office at 10 minutes of 8 and he come over and sat down next to me. And all summer long that way. It come to the end of the summer. It was a great summer for him because I was doing that gatehouse. There was a lot of architectural work, and Tom Eggerman was hired by Mrs. Prochet to set up some details. And so Charlie worked with me and Tom Eggerman very well. And Charlie would go home at night and he'd draw up some plans of what Tom Eggerman wanted. So, come to the end of the summer, I says to Charlie, I says, you got another week and a half to go. I want you to take these keys for Osborne Court. I own those 2 houses. The walls are all marked. I want you to draw plans out for that house, how it's to be divided. And if you want to make any correction, make the correction, but mark them. So when he came through the last few days, he says, I'm all through, got your plans, I'd like to take the next 2 days off. I said, that's okay. So he says, look, I can make one change. He said, where did you study? I studied in my den. And he says, you know, when I get back to college, what I learned from you this summer certainly is going to push me ahead. So the night before he left, he asked Mr. Buchanan to call me up. I asked him to come over to the house. So so I went over to see him, and there was must be at least 50 people there. So he says, I want to make a toast to Mr. Chartier. He says, because I worked for him all summer and he was a wonderful boss. He taught me more in 2 months that I've learned all the time I've been in college. And this year I'll be the smartest boy in my class on account of what I learned from him.